Today we're looking at another curious Forge World model, the menacing and deadly Carab Culln the Risen. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Carab Culln is one of the relatively recent Forge World releases and was formerly the Lord High Commander of the Red Scorpions chapter. I have to say the model is absolutely beautiful, the right balance of ornate detail and brutal mechanics for me for a Dreadnought, which definitely inspired me to make a video on him a little bit earlier. In this video we'll take a look at his datasheet, any obvious buffs and synergies that we can do with the Red Scorpions, and how I would use him on the field of battle myself. In the background, Culln was believed slain in the events following the Indomitus Crusade. He was grievously wounded in slaying the great beast of Sarum, and his remains were conveyed back to the chapter, barely clinging on to life. As befits such a noble hero of the Red Scorpions, he was then interred in a relic Leviathan Dreadnought, allowing him to continue his eternal crusade against the enemies of mankind. So let's see what we can do with him with this mighty new profile. So Carab Culln the Risen is an HQ choice for the Red Scorpions chapter. The Red Scorpions chapter are one of the Forge World chapters that don't have a confirmed genetic lineage, meaning that you can choose to have them act as a successor chapter of any of the main chapters, so he has an absolute ton of options available. He'll cost you 360 points to field, and for that you get the profile of a mighty Leviathan Dreadnought. He has movement 8 with weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2+, strength and toughness 8, 15 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 9 and a 2-up save. He's armed with a Tarsus Scorpii, which has a built-in heavy bolter, 2 heavy flamers, 3 hunter-killer missiles, and a mighty twin assault cannon. To say the least, he's packing a very reasonable amount of firepower, mostly geared to taking out infantry. That Tarsus Scorpii, his mighty power claw, gives him strength times 2, so a mighty strength 16, AP minus 3, and flat damage 4. And it also gives him the ability of Death Hold, which means that in the fight phase, after rolling any hits of 6+ for this weapon, Carab Culln may choose to grab his opponent in a Death Hold. And it goes on to tell you exactly what he does there. He grabs the opponent in his mighty power claw and then fires his heavy bolter at point blank range into them. This inflicts d6 mortal wounds, but it does stop you from using the heavy bolter for the rest of the game, presumably because he's mashed it up against whoever he was giving a nice death hold to, and he can only death hold once per game. A casual d6 mortal wounds is usually going to outstrip the benefit of a heavy bolter, so this seems perfectly reasonable to activate to me. When you take shock assault into account, Carab Culln will on average deal 14 wounds to any standard vehicle in close combat, up to including Imperial Knights, though of course that might drop off a bit if your target has an invul save, and of course once per game you can chase that down with d6 mortal wounds on any turn that he activates it by rolling at least 1/6. Very scary all in all. As well as his mighty offensive power, he also has decent defense. As well as being a 15 wound Leviathan Dreadnought with a 2+ save, he gets the standard Leviathan Dreadnought's reinforced adamantic barriers for a 4+ invul, and he also has the very pragmatically named rule called Proud to Live, Proud to Die, Hard to Kill. This basically gives a aura of 6-up feel no pain type saves to all friendly Red Scorpion models within 6 inches of him, as that will include himself. So it's essentially getting the benefits of being an Iron Hand, even if he doesn't choose to utilise that chapter trait. Having this in an aura is really impressive, as being able to stack other defensive buffs on any other models nearby is great. Could be good to run alongside some tough assault units such as Assault Centurions or Devastator Centurions, or maybe alongside an advancing squadron of Dreadnoughts to keep them all just a little bit safer from enemy fire. Finally, as well as all the special rules that we've mentioned, he also has smoke launchers, which he can use if he doesn't feel like shooting his many weapons that turn, and would rather focus on staying alive. There is also a designer's note saying that if you're using the Forge World datasheets for Lord High Commander Carab Culln or Commander Carab Culln, then of course you can't include Carab Culln the Risen, as they just represent the same character at different points alongside his life and now living death. If we look at his keywords, he also has the character keyword, meaning that he can be given a warlord trait, and he has the relic keyword, meaning that I think that you'll need to include another Red Scorpions HQ choice to be allowed to take him in the first place. But to be fair, that's something you'd probably quite likely want to do if you're playing Red Scorpions. So overall, Carab Culln is an enormously resilient Leviathan Dreadnought, even more so than normal, has a swath of anti-infantry firepower, and is very dangerous in close combat with that Tarsus Scorpii, where he can dish out some mortal wounds. And finally, he has that 6-up feel no pain type aura to buff his fellow Red Scorpions alongside him. He's going to be happiest at the centre of a battle line, advancing into the face of the enemy, while largely laughing off all incoming fire. So let's have a think about the different ways that we can get more out of him when we play him on the table. So Carab Culln, as we've mentioned with Red Scorpions, can be chosen to be a successor chapter of all of the major chapters. So he has an absolute ton of options to utilise, particularly once you factor in Warlord traits. He'll like to be Ultramarines for moving and shooting without penalty, White Scars for advancing and charging to potentially get some key charges off, and potentially a damage 5 Claw. Iron Hands, as we know, have amazing synergy with Dreadnoughts. He already gets the 6-up Feel No Pain, but 5+ Overwatch, ignoring moving and firing for heavy weapons, rerolling 1s with heavy weapons, and degrading slower are all great benefits for him. As well as that, they have Warlord traits that can buff his shooting, better synergy with repairs for Tech Marines, and vehicle-specific stratagems and psychic powers too. You'll have a lot of options with a unique Dreadnought character if you make him an Iron Hand successor. Raven Guard can give him cover when he's outside 12 inches, as can any stealthy successors. +1 to hit and wound against characters never hurts, and as with the Chaplain Dreadnought, he could be an interesting choice to use Shadow Step on, to teleport him across the battlefield straight into the enemy lines turn 1. That could cause some serious issues to your opponent, I think. Salamanders are certainly interesting for being able to put certain Warlord traits on him. For me, mainly to buff his considerable durability. He could be toughness 10, so shrugging off those las cannons no problem. You can make him -1 to hit, and +1 toughness with their psychic powers. Of course, their flamer rule will buff his heavy flamers, and some reroll hits in close combat certainly isn't bad at all. For an Imperial Fist successor, getting extra damage on all those many heavy weapons will make him absolutely lethal to vehicles, and ignores cover certainly doesn't hurt either. Blood Angels could certainly be handy, activating Red Rampage, which will massively up his close combat damage output, and +1's charge will help him get there. Finally, Dark Angels is also particularly helpful for him, as those +6-inch range to the guns in Devastator Doctrine will give him 14-inch heavy flamers, and a 30-inch assault cannon, which will help his damage output through the game. In terms of character support, your standard captains and lieutenants will be great, if you can get in their aura, and as such a massive model he'll also get more out of. Things like Chaplain Listeners, where each buff could potentially affect a lot of shots or a lot of close combat. Might of Heroes could make him toughness 9 as well, if that's relevant against your opponent's firepower, and Tech Marines could stack some extra wounds back on him, and a Master of Machines Tech Marine from Faith and Fury could counteract the -1 he'll get from moving and shooting, keeping him hitting on 2s. In terms of stratagems, naturally anything to help his durability or damage output from the supplement books is likely to be useful for him, and there's plenty too from the main Space Marine Codex. Armour of Contempt could help him shrug mortal wounds, one of the few ways that people can actually efficiently damage Leviathans, although he does already have his 6-up Feel No Pain type save, so it does make it a bit less viable. Big Guns Never Tire could keep him hitting on 2s despite striding towards the enemy. Only in Death Does Duty End could allow him to surge back for one last attack when he's finally brought down, which when you're hitting with that enormous Tarsus Scorpii is certainly not a bad choice, and Honour the Chapter as well can be a decent pick, again to let him fight twice with an enormous amount of close combat damage. Wisdom of the Ancients for 1 command point is a good way of getting some very cheap rerolls out of an advancing battle line, as he'll likely be wanting to stomp towards the enemy at the heart of a Red Scorpion's formation, giving everyone his 6+ Feel No Pain. We couldn't talk about Dreadnoughts without mentioning Duty Eternal, halving incoming damage and truly making sure that nothing's going to efficiently bring Culln down. Hero of the Chapter is also worth mentioning to give him a Warlord trait while not making him your Warlord, meaning that you could give him something to amp up his massive combat capabilities such as the Imperium's Sword, or various other fighty traits from the various supplement books, like the White Scars Chigorian Storm, knowing that you're safe to still throw him forward at the enemy without worrying about giving up Slay the Warlord. Finally, it might well be worth keeping a command point reroll on standby for when he uses his Death Hold, as if you roll a 1 on the number of mortal wounds, it could be very powerful to reroll that roll. In terms of actually deploying him on the tabletop, I'd want to deploy him front and centrally, alongside any other advancing elements from the army, so he can walk forward, dish out a whole bunch of firepower, and give everyone his Feel No Pain 6+ save, making the enemy have to pay with more firepower if they want to remove your units. His firepower isn't too bad at all, but it's not really anything on par with, say, a Twin Storm Cannon Leviathan. You are really going to have to get Culln into close combat to truly make the most out of that Mighty Claw to justify his investment. I deploy him front and centrally because it means that your opponent has the least possible space to move away from him, and it means that if they want to take the centre of the board, they're going to have to get charged by this Leviathan death machine. If you're going second, it could be worth using prepared positions in some matchups, as on a 2+ save it's particularly powerful and can further dissuade your opponent from shooting him. I typically tend to fire off his hunter-killer missiles turn 1 if you have a viable target for them, just to make sure he doesn't die before they're used, and from there it's a simple matter of moving, shooting, assaulting every single turn to try and make him the biggest problem for your enemy as possible. I wouldn't bother to stay still to optimise his ballistic skill, unless all that matters is just killing one particular enemy infantry unit. As I said, one of his main values is the close combat, so I'd keep him moving every single turn in normal circumstances. Once he reaches melee, certainly bear in mind any damage dealing stratagem buffs that you can. Particularly consider Honour the Chapter if it's going to make the difference between ending a key enemy threat this turn or next turn. And when he dies, you have some interesting options. You could either potentially try and get him to fight one last time as he goes down, with only in death, or you could think about trying to make him explode as he explodes on a 5 and 6, so using a command point to re-roll that explosion to make it happen could be a good way of showering your opponents in some last mortal wounds before he becomes Carab Culln the Fallen. He's truly an absolute beast of a character, both in shooting, melee and mostly in defence, so I'd certainly not be stingy with command points, and particularly get him to have good use of Duty Eternal whenever he's focused down. Overall, I think he does compare very well compared with your standard relic Leviathan Dreadnoughts. He has decent shooting output and absolutely monstrous combat output, all while being a bit tougher, both with an extra wound and that very nice 6-up Feel No Pain aura. You can do some very silly things with certain Warlord traits, either making him ludicrously tough or ludicrously killy in close combat, and I honestly think that we'd see him run a lot more commonly in competitive games if more people owned the model. Let me know your opinions on him down in the comments below, particularly if you've had any experience running him yourself. I'd be all ears to hear it. We'll be continuing our look at Space Marine units very regularly on this channel, so if you're interested in hearing more, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. We have new 40k content out every single day. If you'd like to support the channel, I have a Patreon page, which you can find a link to in the description below, as well as supporting the creation of new Auspex Tactics videos. There are a bunch of other benefits, including early videos every week, my own tournament list and tournament report videos, and voting on the next videos that we make for this channel. So if any of that interests you, then please check it out below. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.